Welcome to our Bible study for November 24th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and the last Sunday in this quarter. This quarter is all about worship, and this is a wonderful closing to this. It's the 139th Psalm. And kind of like I did last week, I want to add to what we're looking at today. They do the first 12 verses in our encounter, but I want us to consider the entire psalm. And so let's begin first by hearing this wonderful psalm. We can accept it as a blessing or as a curse, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment, but hear this, if you can, as a blessing. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go to flee your spirit? Or where can I run from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and night wraps itself around me, even the darkness is not as dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. Oh, that you would kill the wicked, O God, and that the bloodthirsty would depart from me, those who speak of you maliciously and lift themselves up against you for evil. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with a perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. There's a story about a Catholic school, and the children in the school were getting a little heavy-handed with the cookies, and the nuns told them, you can only have one cookie each when you're coming down the line at lunch. Just get one cookie. And yet kids were getting 2, 3, 4 or more cookies. And one day a nun had finally had it, and so she made a little note and she put it next to the cookies, and it said, take only one cookie. God is watching. And a smart aleck kid made a second note and put it next to the apples, and that note said, take all the apples you want, God is watching the cookies. Well, this psalm is a psalm that says God sees everything. Even darkness is as day to God. God's not only watching the cookies, God is also watching the apples. And in that sense, this psalm could be a curse. God sees everything. Some of you may remember Mel Gibson had a movie a while back, What Women Want, and I think he got electrocuted a little bit with a hairdryer or something, and it gave him the power to be able to hear what women were thinking, and they didn't, whatever they were thinking, he could hear as if they were speaking to him. And at first that seemed a wonderful, wonderful blessing. He would know what women wanted. He would know how to manipulate them. He was a salesperson to sell them things. He would know how to manipulate them to get them to go out with him, you know, all of this kind of stuff. But what he discovered was that this blessing of being able to hear their thoughts also was a curse, because he could tell, he could hear everything they thought about him. And he was kind of a misogynistic, chauvinistic kind of guy, and they knew that, and they saw that in him, and that's what they thought about him. And so it became a curse because he really had a mirror held up to himself. And so this psalm too can be a blessing and a curse. God knows everything. Before a word even comes out of my mouth, you know it. That's a little scary. Some of the words that come out of our mouths. Before I do anything, no matter where I go, you are already there with me. That can be a curse. And in a sense, we do get a mirror held up to our face then. If before I say anything, God already knows it, I need to be very careful about what's going to come out of my mouth. If God is everywhere and always watching me, I want to make sure that I am being faithful. I might can hide it from other people, but I can't hide it from God. But ultimately, this psalm really is a blessing. And so I want us to read it as a blessing. I want us to go through the various verses and just kind of comment. I'll comment about each little section here and see how it really is a blessing for us. And so it begins, of course, by saying that, God, you know everything. You know when I sit down and when I stand up and all of these things. And then we get to the fifth verse, and it says, you hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. And so this is almost the image of God completely encircling us as a shield. But in modern English, what we really would say would be, God, you have my back. You're behind me. You got my back where I can't see. And you have your hand upon me. And that can be a hand of blessing on my head, but it also can be a hand just holding me. Oftentimes people who are having difficulty walking, if we can grab them by the arm and just give them that extra little bit of stability they need, they can walk and get where they need to be. And so I don't have to be afraid that I'm going to fall down because God has his hand upon me and is caring for me. And that's the kind of presence we want, of course. That is a blessing. Verse 6. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. And what I hear in this verse more than anything else is I want and I need a God who is bigger than me, who is wiser than me, who is far, far beyond me. I don't need a God that I can control, a God that I can manipulate, because that makes me greater than that God. And so your thoughts are so far above me. Your knowledge is more than I can possibly take in. There's no way I can even attain it. That's a good thing. It doesn't mean that I'm not smart, that I'm not wise or whatever, but it means that there is one who is wiser than me, and how wonderful that is, because that one loves me and that one's hand is upon me. Verses 7 through 10. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you're there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. What beautiful poetry. If I ascend as high as I can ascend, well, I can't fly, but if I could, you would be there. If I descend as far as I can go, you will be there. If I take the wings of the morning and I fly as far to the east or as far to the west as I can go, you are already there, your right hand holding me fast, and your hand leading me. Now, I do think it is significant that David says, if I make my bed in Sheol. I don't want to talk about that a little bit. This is almost an aside, but it's pretty important. Nowhere in the Old Testament, with the exception of a couple of passages in Ezekiel, is there the idea of a heavenly kingdom that comes after our deaths. The Old Testament understands humans as mortals, and the Psalm particularly do. So often in the Psalms it says, I am mortal, you alone, O God, are immortal. And so there wasn't really a well-developed concept of what happens after you die. And so they would simply say, I go to Sheol. That is from the Hebrew word meaning hollow, and it was this sort of hollowed out, shadowy place. Some Jews would have believed literally that we are just there in this hollowed out, shadowy place. It's not a place that's a place of punishment like hell, but neither is it a place like heaven of great delight and no pain. It's just kind of almost a holding area, maybe, for those who have died. Others would have seen this simply as a metaphor or a symbol for the grave. I go to that hollowed out place. I go to the grave. And after that, there is nothing. Dust you are, and to dust you shall return, is where we get that idea. That's all that we are in the Old Testament. And you may remember that Jesus had some tussles with the Sadducees because they did not believe in eternal life. They didn't believe in the resurrection. The Pharisees, on the other hand, were more like Jesus. They did believe in the resurrection, and there was conflict between them as well. And so when David, from whom this psalm is attributed, or to whom this psalm is attributed, when he writes, even if I make my bed in Sheol, you're there, there's this wonderful trust that you are always with me. And even in death, you are with me. And even if in death it means that I simply return to the dust, that's going to be okay also, because you are with me. It's powerful, powerful poetry, powerful, powerful truth there as well. Well, verse 11 and 12, again, beautiful poetry. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and night wraps itself around me, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. A number of years ago, I bought a cheap pair of night vision goggles. And, when you have those things on, everything kind of looks green. And that's the way it was. And it had a light you could turn on that was an infrared light. So you couldn't see it. It was this red light, but you couldn't see the light. But then it really would illuminate the night even more. And what that infrared light particularly did was to illuminate the eyes of animals who were out and about. And sometimes we'd be out hiking at night or on a backpacking trip or whatever, and you swing that thing around and you'd actually see eyes looking at you, which was kind of spooky. Well, here this is saying God doesn't need night vision goggles. Even the night is like day to God. And it's a powerful, wonderful thing, because it says, even if the night wraps itself around me. Now let's think about that symbolically. There are times in our lives when the darkness just seems to wrap itself around us. We get that phone call, we hear from that person, the doctor comes in the room, whatever it might be, and everything just goes kind of dark for us. And we find ourselves, somebody even say this, in a dark place. What this is saying is God can see us still, and even more importantly, God is with us still. We just heard that even if I make I travel on the wings of the dawn, as far away as I can go, your hand is on me, it's guiding me, and it's leading me, and it's blessing me. And so that is also true in those dark times in our lives, and that is something that we should be truly, truly thankful for. My favorite verse in the whole Bible is, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not, cannot, will not overcome it. John tells us this in his prologue, and Jesus is the light shining in the darkness. When I hear that verse, I often think about a candle in a coal mine. A candle on a movie set with lights and everything everywhere is not all that impressive. I have a candle right here, and you can see it, but it's not all that impressive. But a candle in a coal mine, all eyes are drawn to it. The only light there, that is the light of Jesus. And when we are in those dark places, we can know it may only be a candle, but it is a candle that the darkness cannot, will not ever put out. As long as we are talking about Jesus, we can be reminded as well at Christmas time, the scriptures are quoted concerning Jesus, that those who have sat in darkness have seen a great light. And this is the hope that Psalm 139 says as well. The darkness is as light to God. We don't have to wait for the lights to come on. God is already with us, can already see us, even in those dark times. Well, now we're going to move on a little bit past the lesson in the encounter, but I do want to consider the rest of the psalm. So the psalmist, David, says, "For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance." And a little bit there you can hear him playing with the idea that we are dust and God makes us out of dust. This is poetry. This is not medicine. This is a medical textbook. And so you're making me in the earth as well as in my mother's womb, taking that dust and molding me and forming me. And then you will blow into me the breath of life. Oftentimes when someone is going for surgery, my prayer for them is, Lord, just as you knit him or her together in their mother's wombs, knit them back together after this surgery. And for me, that's powerful because I'm using this wonderful imagery of God, who is not only there for us when we are born, or there for us when we are being knit together in our mother's womb, or in the bowels of the earth for that matter, but God is there knitting us back together all throughout our lives. And then there's that wonderful verse, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. David recognized the amazing fact that we are made, our bodies are just miraculous machines, but they're more than machines because they're made in the image of God. One of my favorite sitcoms from way back was MASH, and I bet many of you know that and maybe would agree. There was one episode where Hawkeye, the Alan Alda character, has, I think, wrecked a Jeep, and he has a concussion, and he's in a South Korean farmer's house with the farmer and then the whole family, and he is afraid he has a concussion, and so he wants to stay awake because he's afraid if he goes to sleep that he might not ever wake up. And so he is doing things to try to entertain the farmer and the farmer's family, but it's really to keep himself awake. And at one point he says, and I looked for the clip and I couldn't find it, so I have to do my little Alan Alda impression here, but he says, look at your hand. It's one of the most incredible instruments in the universe. Of all the bones in the human body, 1/4 are in the hand. But forget the hand, look at the thumb. That wondrous mechanism that separates us from the other animals. The world-famous opposable thumb. That amazing device that has transported more students to college than the Boston Post robe. Ideal for sucking, especially as a baby, and lauded in song and story as the perfect instrument for pulling out a plum. Or in the case of the Caesars, for holding it down for the gladiator to die, or holding it up, which means see you later at the orgy. My friends, for getting up and down the pike, in your pie, in your eye, I give you the thumb. The flexor, ossis, metacarpi pollis, flexes the metacarpal bone, that is, draws it inward over the palm, thus producing the movement of opposition, and the Boy Scout salute. But our greatest triumph comes not from flexing the metacarpal bone and making a fist, which always seems to be thirsting to be clenched. No, 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 no. Our greatest movement is when we open our hand. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes, going right through that wonderful opposable thumb. Well, then we get to verse 16. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance, and in your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them yet existed. Now, what this sounds like, and sometimes people interpret this as, well, you have planned my entire life out, and whatever happens to me, it's because you caused it to happen. We Cumberland Presbyterians would reject that as fatalism, but it is a part of the wider Presbyterian Reform movement, this idea that God has determined things, not only our ultimate salvation, but determined things on earth. And there's the old joke about the Presbyterian falls off the ladder and says, phew, I'm glad that's over. But God did not push the Presbyterian or the Baptist or anybody else off of the ladder. We recognize that God gives us a free will and free choices, and yet God does know. And so all the days of my life you already knew. In your book were written all those days, even when none of them yet existed. It's almost like God has already written our book, not forcing us like a puppet to do whatever God wants, but God knows at the very beginning of our lives everything that we're going to do and all the twists and the turns that our lives are going to make. Now, God does have a will for our lives, and God has a purpose for our lives, and we frequently find ways to thwart that will and step outside of that will. And God is not done with us then. God simply rewrites the book. And again, the book may be completely written before I'm born, but God has already written and rewritten it to account for all of the ways that I went outside of God's will. And yet God found a way to pull me back, or to take those bad choices that I made and use them for some good and continue me on the purpose, on the path that God wanted me to have. Well, then we get to and let me mention that this is rather mysterious in some ways as well. How is it that God can simultaneously know everything and be directing our lives, and also giving us choices, and also figuring out ways to get us back on track, or taking the off track we've gone and making that God's purpose? And the answer we find in verse 6 and verse 17. We already mentioned verse 6. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high I cannot attain it. And then the next verse, 17, how weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I can't make sense of all of this. I'm now at the end. What does the psalmist deduce? I am still with you. No matter what twists and turns our lives take, no matter how the book of our life gets written, we are with God. How wonderful that is. Well, now the psalm seems to just get broken off and go in a completely different direction when we get to verse 19. Oh, that you would kill the wicked, O God, and that the bloodthirsty would depart from me. Those who speak of you maliciously and lift themselves up against you for evil. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. And so some commentators say, well, what the psalmist is saying is anybody who's an enemy of God is an enemy of mine. And perhaps another commentator I thought wonderfully said, Jesus says that we are to love our enemies, but he doesn't say that we won't have enemies. We will have enemies. We're called to love them. The psalmist says, I hate them with a perfect hate. I loathe them. What is going on here? Well, part of it is the psalmist has already said, there's nothing I can do or say or go that you don't already know about. And so now I'm giving to you my true feelings. And that's powerful, because there are times when we feel just like the psalmist feels. When somebody does us wrong, when somebody does someone else wrong, when somebody is an enemy of God, it can infuriate us. And the psalmist is naming that fury, and that's okay. Paul tells us that we can be angry, but do not sin. And so he didn't say he's going to do anything to the enemies. He's just being honest. I loathe them. I hate them. But the psalmist also is turning over these thoughts to God. And I love the way the psalm ends, and it just ends right on the heels of, I hate these enemies. I count them, anybody's your enemy, I count them as my enemy. And then the psalmist says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. It's almost like the question is, God, I've just told you, I'm these people that I feel are opposing you, and these people that are bloodthirsty towards me, I hate them and I loathe them, but I want you to search me and know me and let me know if there's any wickedness in me. The psalm begins with, you have searched me and you know me, O God, and it ends with, search me, O God. It ends with a prayer, asking God to do what God has already done, but then essentially saying, but reveal to me if there's any wickedness, in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Lead me in the right paths, as the 23rd Psalm says. What the psalmist is saying is, here's how I'm feeling. Now help me know what I'm supposed to do with those feelings, because you already know how I'm feeling. And you've already set out a purpose for my life. And so help me not only to know these things, but give me the strength. Keep your hand on me and lead me and guide me so that I will do the things that you want me to do. This psalm is not a curse. This song is a blessing. And this is Thanksgiving week. And so thanks be to God for all of these blessings. Happy Thanksgiving. Amen.